Accordingly then, O Simmias, in reality, those who practice philosophy correctly are studying to die, and they fear death least of all human beings. But consider it from this perspective. For if on the one hand they have been altogether set apart from the body, and are accordingly eagerly desirous to have their soul self by self, would it not be quite irrational if they would be afraid and perturbed when this happens? Or if they would not gladly set out for that place? For those for which those that arrive, there is hope to attain that which they yearn for throughout their life. They yearned for phronesis. There's our key word again, over and over. And having crossed over from that association from selves which have been liberated, Okay, so there's a crossing over in death. And you have something. This is significant. Why? Often we think of death as losing something. We don't want to lose our achievements, our self, really. We don't want to go into the void. We don't want to be worm food. Here he's saying, no, you don't get it. You're achieving something. You're having something. You're having the soul itself by self. And you want that because in that experience, you can have phronesis and you cross over and you're liberated. This is an interesting way of understanding the end of our life, right? Furthermore, on one hand, remember men and dare, men, this and then this. So men and dare are the clauses. So on the one, and so we can translate it on the one hand, but it's not two. There's not just two clauses. So on the one hand, I don't like that expression. I don't hear it much, so I'm not used to it. So if you have an idea of another way of saying, on the one hand this, but then this, let me know, because on the one hand is clumsy. In the Greek, it's just men. And then later on, there should be a de, which should be on the other hand. Okay, so furthermore, men, surely it is the case with most human beings that at death of their beloved youths and wives and sons, they have been quite willing to go into Hades, being led by this hope of seeing there those whose company they long for, right? And that is something that we recognize from our world, right? Our time. That part of one thing that does give us hope about death is we will see our loved ones and our family. Shall one who is truly a lover of mindfulness, there we go. So we've had this expression before, lover of mindfulness. And we tried to create a triad. If lover of mindfulness, how does it relate to lover of wisdom? Philosophy, philosophy, and philosophy, philophronesis, and philomathesis. It's a question. Philomathesis, lover of learning. Philophronesis, what we just mentioned, and philosophy. So if one who is truly a lover of phronesis, philophronesis, who also holds much to this same hope, but reasons that they will never worthily encounter self anywhere else other than in Hades, the afterlife, and they are perturbed at dying and not be glad to be there, one must indeed believe, my companion, if he is indeed a true philosopher, that he is firmly convinced that he will never encounter pure mindfulness, there's that word again, anywhere else but there. But if this happens to be so, just as I said just now, wouldn't it be irrational for such a person to fear death? Philosophy, what is philosophy? A kind of exercise and activity in which you no longer fear death. Quite so, Zeus. We can add that to our dialectic, why not? Keep that as some notes. What is philosophy in relation to death was our dialectic that we're building notes for. So this would go under how do we relate back to philosophy, others back to self. Or maybe it's No, because death is the other. So we've got self and other. If philosophy exists, so philosophy is self in relation to death. So we could say other to other. Other to other. So death in relation to us. We are not feared. We don't fear death. So take that as a note. Quite so. Why, Zeus? Is it not the case then that you have sufficient positive proof that this brave, whom you would see being perturbed at the eventually of death, was not a philosopher? Oh, is it interesting? You find someone, a great man who is scared about death, then you can conclude that dude's not a philosopher. But a lover of the body. There you go. So we have a name for non-philosophers. So in this category of if philosophy is not, or fake philosophy, how do we relate? How does death relate to us? We lovers of body. We fear death. We fear death. And what is philosophy if it's not, if philosophy doesn't exist in relation to death? We are actually lovers of bodies. Whoops. So I'm in the category of if philosophy is not, and I'm in the category of others to others. So philosophy is existing if philosophy exists. This is if philosophy doesn't exist, and our other that we're using as our second term to understand our primary term, because dialectic means two. We have to have a self and we have to have other. The other is death. So what can you say about philosophy itself? And what can you relate? Well, it is actually lover of, was it lover of the body? So there's actually a Greek word for that in the text. Oh, and before we get that, how do we relate? So if self to other is how does philosophy relate to death? And then how does that death relate to us? So the second other, you can have a second other. Like how does, having been affected by philosophy, there is no philosophy. So that kind of death, how does that kind of death relate to us? So that's what we're going to make the second other. Well, we actually end up killing ourselves, but we also fear death. It's an interesting predicament we put ourselves in. For human beings or cultures at the level of their development, according to time, if they're a culture who doesn't have this, who doesn't have philosophy, if philosophy does not exist, then they will fear death. That's how the relationship with death and people, but also they will kill each other. So they end up fearing the thing and relating to each other in a way that creates the very thing that they fear. What a freaking tragic situation for a culture that doesn't have philosophy. It doesn't have what? Purification, perfection. It doesn't have what? The logos and dialectic. It doesn't have what? The art and practice of death and dying. It doesn't have what? Self-phronesis and the acquisition of truth. It doesn't have what? The knowledge of each of the real beings. Those are all the aspects of philosophy that we've seen already in just the first, 18 pages? 19 pages. Isn't that wonderful? We also can see from this first 19 pages, by applying the logos and dialectic, we are in a tragic situation of suffering. Why? We fear death the most. But also, we are engaged in activities that kill each other and ourselves and the planet. We are actively propelling ourselves towards the thing we fear the most. And ironically, philosophy removes that problem. Let's go back over to the other side of the dialectic to see it. Purifies and liberates us from the body and those troubles. Purification. But also enables us to acquire truth and phronesis, which means we don't fear death. So so philosophy solves both. We don't fear death anymore, and we don't have the problems of this irrational, harmful, violent relationship to each other and to death. Us and death. Isn't that amazing? What do you say, Owen?
Wow.
Really?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so that goes into lover of the body. Now, we have a Greek word. That's cool. We're going to have another word. We had philophronesis, philosophia, and philomathesis as learning. So a good way of remembering lover of learning is math thesis. You can think of a nerd who loves to learn as someone who's doing a thesis on math. You couldn't get much more of a lover of learning as an image as a math thesis, so philomathesis, a lover of learning. But also we have, by the way, that creating a funny story or narrative in order to remember something philosophical, that's mythology. Right? And Socrates says we have to spend our time before the sun sets explaining and understanding in detail, but also creating mythology about it, mythologizing. Nature of death and dying and what we will encounter at that place. So, speaking of, let's have this word here, lover of the body. We can recognize this word here. Zoom in, please.
Importing all preferences from home interface.
I need to get a better AI, by the way. I'm going to improve that. Lover of the body. We have this, that's a P, PH. I, that leggy lady is an L. O is an O. And W is also an O, by the way. That's an M. That's an S. I think this is an S. Let me make sure. So PHILO, that's our philo. SOMATOS. I think that's what it says, but let's make sure. We have to go out into space. Take us to space, Jarvis.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
No, just right now.
And I'm here to assist you with a variety of tasks as best I can.
Jarvis, I can't see the internet. The whole reason we go into space is so I can do the internet.
Systems are now fully operational.
Thank you, Jarvis. Jarvis is the AI that I got from Tony Stark. If you want to know what that noise was. So that convert it into Greek. Paste it in here. Philosomatos. 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 Paste it in here. philosometos, loving the body, indulging in it. Indulging it. And we see it in the Phaedo. That's what we're reading. Let's open that for fun. Is it the Phaedo? Yeah. Is it the section we're on? 68C? Yeah. And this man is a lover of money or honor, of both. What? Oh, okay. It's right before here. Actually, let's see how the Loeb translates our yoga of separating the soul. Here we go. It is true, my friend, I have great hopes that when I reach that place where I am going, I shall there, if anywhere, attain fully to that which has been the chief object of my past life. Okay? Philosophers want to get that which you get when you separate from the body. So that the journey which is now imposed on me is begun with good hope, and the like hope exists for every man who thinks that his mind has been purified and made ready. You want to be happy and content when you die? Do philosophy. Certainly, and does not the purification that we do consist of that which we've mentioned long ago in our discourse? In the purification definition. What is it? Demonstration. Separating, as so far as possible, the soul from the body. How? Division. Teaching the soul the habit of collecting and bringing itself together from all parts of the body. 1. And living so far as it can, both now and hereafter. This life and outside of the body. This life and the next. Alone by itself. Freed from the body as if from fetters. Certainly. Pretty close. Some differences in the different texts. Certainly. Well then, is this what we call death, not a release and separation from the body? Exactly so. So we miss key terms like purification, of course, and liberation. Exactly so. But as we hold the true philosophers, as they alone are not always most eager to release the soul, and just this, the release and separation of the soul from the body, is their study. The study of the true philosophers is the release and separation of the soul from the body. Wow.
Wow.
Then, as I said in the beginning, it would be absurd if a man who has been all his life fitting himself to live as nearly in the state of death as he could, should be disturbed when death came to him. Would it not be absurd? I'm not a lover of the body, but I should be sitting more straighter. Of course. In fact then, Simmias, the true philosophers practice dying and death. And death is less terrible, okay, the practice of dying. So the study and practice of dying. And death is less terrible to them than to any other man. Consider in this way, they are in every way hostile to the body and desire to have the soul apart and alone by itself. Okay, hostile. Okay, this is the best translation we've had until the Balboa. So let's see what we have in the Balboa instead of hostile. The exercise of the philosophers. true practice of philosophies is studying to die, and selves fear least, but consider it from that apart from the body. Consider it in this way. They have and everywhere hostile to body and have desire to. The right section? How could it not? E. Yeah. Okay. Those who practice philosophy correctly are studying to die and fear selves least, but consider it from this perspective. Here we go. On the one hand, they have been altogether set apart from the body. So set apart from the body is different from despising the body. Interesting. No, hostile to the body. Not hostile, we're sitting apart. Interesting. Yeah. So in this text we have altogether set apart from the body. In the previous text that we had up until this translation, they are hostile to the body and desirous to have. Interesting. Different, right? We're not hostile to the body as philosophers. We're just trying to become set apart from the body. Now we can ask, wonder why he translated it in that way. Could this be the author's own lack of purification from his cultural mythology? Puritanianism, whatever it is, Puritanianism. That which is hostile to the sinful, the bad. We hate the evil. We flagellate ourselves in certain Christian traditions. Could be. That would be foolish if they would be frightened, okay. For they have what they long for through life, and they long for wisdom. Notice, we have philosophia, we have philophronesis. Philosophia is the love of wisdom. Philophronesis is not the love of wisdom, but the love of phronesis. See the significance of having the new Balboa text that you can get? There should be a link below for free. Thanks to the Balboas, Juan Balboa, and his wife Maria and his family. Because we have the word wisdom here. That's not phronesis. One of the key questions we've had in this text is what the heck is phronesis? We would miss that question. We'd miss it without this translation. We're so lucky to have this translation. And escaping from companionship from which they hated. Hated is hated? Do we hate the body? Here we go. They yearn for mindfulness, not wisdom, and have been crossed over from association from which selves have been liberated. Is liberated different from hated? That's very different, right? That's significant. I wonder why the translator translated it in that way. We don't hate the body. This is significant also because we've also mentioned sexual stimulation as one of the things that is not the interest of the philosopher. But we saw at the start in the mythology, Socrates has a little boy. He has like a baby on his wife's knee. So he can't have hated the body and despised sexual stimulation. To have a baby? I don't think so. There is that one possibility, that one time in history, immaculate conception. Could have been that. It's a bit of a joke. But we know that it's not hated or despised. It's liberated. Okay? I mean, that's a good question. I wonder why the translator translated it in that way. And I wonder what the result has been. Right, when we go there, we long to see our family and our loved ones. Okay. My friend, if he is really a philosopher, he'll constantly believe that he will find pure wisdom. Nope, Phronesis. Nowhere else than in the other world. If this is so, it'd be very foolish for such a man to fear death. Very foolish. Is it not a sufficient indication that when you see a man troubled, he is going to die, that he is not a lover of wisdom, but a lover of the body? It's where we are. Okay, interesting. But we have a word for it. The word was philosomatos. Philosomatos. Lover of soggy tomatoes. Philosomatos. Soggy tomatoes. So let's add it with here. Got philosophia, philophronesos, philomathesis, the lover of learning, and we have soggy tomatoes. M-A-T-O-S. Philosomatos. Lover of soggy tomatoes. Hey, if you have spent your life doing philosophy in the right way, you've been engaged in the art and practice of death and dying. If you think philosophy is something other, you're really a soggy tomato. That's the joke we will all say from now on. And we will laugh hilariously on into the night. We will laugh hilariously at this hilarious joke that you are a soggy tomato if you don't recognize true philosophy, the art and practice of death and dying. We shall laugh. And we shall applaud our funny joke. Soggy tomatoes. Philosomatos. Lover of the body. Okay. For this self, which also happens to be to some degree a lover of riches and a lover of honors. Okay, so there we have our triad. Okay, lover of riches. What's that? Lover of riches is Philokrimatos. Philokrimatos. C-H-R. Philokrimatos. Philokrimatos. Lover of cremation. C-H-R-I-M-A-T-O-S. Hey, Philokrimatos. And the other word is lover of honors. Philotimos. Philotimos. T-I-M-O-S. Philotimos. Lover of riches. Philokrimatos. And lover of honors. Philotimos. Now, the Timocratic man, Timos from Timocratic, in the Republic is the second highest quality of the state. So in the Republic, he uses the state as a metaphor for the soul. And so the best government of the state or the soul is the aristocratic, or the king, the philosopher king. The second is the timocratic. So aristocratic, kingly. Timocratic, that's the lover of honor. And there's the oligarchic, and so on. So the lover of honor is the second highest kind of state. It's a problem. It's not the way we should be ruling our soul. But timocratic, or lover of honor, we can see Timos from lover of honor. It's a little tidbit. So, Philotimos, lover of honor. Philokrimatos, lover of riches. And they are two subsections of Philosomatos, or lover of the body. So we can make a triad here, right next to our triad of Philosophia, Philophronesos, and Philomathesis. Okay. Cool. Certainly it is just as you say. Take notice then, O Simius, does not what is called virility, we call it alpha jokingly, properly belong especially to those who have such a disposition? By all means. Is it not also the case that the virtue, so virility, so there's some sort of strength and power, the virtue of sound-mindedness, of Socrates, which even the many call sound-mindedness, but not being swept away by one's passions, but maintain themselves in a disdainful and orderly way? Does it not properly belong only to those who have most accordingly disdain the body and live in philosophy? Interesting. So there we have this idea of disdain finally coming into this translation. Interesting. Let's see this word disdain. Origrusin. Take no heed or neglect, esteem little or lightly. That's not the same as disdain, is it? To take something lightly or to ignore, to esteem little or lightly, to make small account, to take no heed. So, maybe this is a remnant from a past translation that's influenced our translator here, maybe. So let's keep the Greek. Actually, let's take a note of this and get the translation. Oops. Let's get the translation to take no heed, to esteem little or take lightly. And put that into the text as a note. Okay. Esteem little or lightly, or to take no heed. Okay. So those who take no heed of the body and live in philosophy are those who have the virtue of even-temperedness and are not swept away by their passions. They can keep their cool necessarily. But if indeed you are willing to bring the mind to courage and sound-mindedness, okay, so there's our second virtue. As a recap, we have 3 primary virtues. And whoops. 3 primary virtues. Temperance or sophrosyne, keeping our cool, that's the first one. Courage is the second one. That's what he's mentioning now. Wisdom is the top one. And then those 3 together give rise to justice, which is the fourth. And the final one. Then maybe phronesis. Sometimes phronesis is mentioned as a virtue. So that's a question mark. But it's not mentioned in the same... It's mentioned elsewhere as a virtue, so we don't know what it is yet. But if you're willing to bring to mind courage and sound-mindedness of others, will they appear to you to be strange? In what way? You know that the others think death is the greatest of all evils. Yes, indeed. Is it not the case that the brave among selves, when submitting to death, submit themselves for fear of greater calamities? Oh, so courage. So those who we call courageous or brave usually are brave when encountering death because they are afraid of something worse happening. Right? That's very different than what we've been talking about. So, do others think death is the greatest of all evils? Now, we want to make sure that this is the word evil, because evil has a strong connotation in our world currently because of the influence of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Evil as some sort of sinister presence that we can't reason with because it only wants the bad, so we're justified in killing people we don't like. Right? So we want to make sure that this word is not evil, because evil is a supernatural, sinister force that is in nature irrational, so it doesn't have the self-logos, is in nature deceitful, so it doesn't have the good true state of mind, so it's not true, and is in nature something that you don't want, because its nature is fundamentally bad and poisonous. So the triad of the self-logos, self-mind, and the one-self, take the opposite, you've got evil. Irrational, you can't reason with evil people, all you can do is shoot and kill them. Have bad mind. Even if they try to reason, they don't have a good state of mind, they're not honest, they're not speaking in good faith, they're just trying to trick you. Their mind is not pure. And their self is bad, poisonous. We can recognize that that anti-self triad in any war. As soon as you start a war, you apply the anti-self triad, the fundamental opposite of the truth of selves, because that's bullshit. It's not true. We do have the self-logos, we do have the self-mind, and we are the one self, which is what we do want. Every self is meaningful. Okay? Which means we can solve our problems through the self-logos. Self-mind is open to all, and the one self is the destiny to all. So we can go back to our dialectic and point out this is if philosophy exists, we can pursue the dialectic, and we can purify and liberate ourselves from our problems and acquire truth and being. Okay, so that's what happens if we have the idea of evil, we will end up in this. Because evil is a philosophy that is not. It's fundamentally inaccurate, and it's fundamentally against the self-triad. leading to what we saw here. We fear death and we kill each other. Boo. And we can recognize that self-triad, and say, hey, what's evil? Oh, you can't reason with them. So every war, they say that the enemy is the devil or heathen or, think of civil rights movement in America. They called African Americans monkeys, apes. Why? Because apes and monkeys can't reason. So there's no point reasoning with them. Therefore, we're going to justify our problems, our injustice. We can feel better about ourselves, not because we're perfecting ourselves and purifying ourselves to the self-triad, but because we just naturally are born that way. So a false hierarchy. Instead of going up the hierarchy of the logos, you're just born better because you're white. But as you perfect yourself through the actual hierarchy of the logos, you develop the virtues that we're talking about now. But also you develop the dialectic. So if you're developing the logos and the dialectic, you have a way of acting providentially towards people. So providence. If you rule out any development of the logos and you just say, oh, you're better because you're white, then you don't have providence. You just act out your terrible, disgusting injustices towards whoever's on the lower rung. That's tyranny, right? And that's the appeal to tyranny. It's progression up the logos without actually progressing up the logos. You're more hierarchically developed because your color of their skin or your family of birth or your wealth or whatever, and you get to act your injustice on others because you haven't developed the virtue of justice, which is a virtue you develop through philosophy. Okay, simple. So how do you justify, so if you have problems, what do? Logos. So you solve problems. But how do you justify playing out your injustice? You can't reason to people because they don't have the self-logos. They are irrational. They are apes. They are subhuman. It's only humans can think, so there's no point talking to them. Just kill them. The problems of if philosophy doesn't exist, right? That irrationality is applied to the devil or evil. So we want to make sure that the word evil is not in our text. Finally, also, that the devil always tries to trick you. Okay? That's also applied to whatever enemy we're made to hate in order for the authorities to convince us to fight each other and not realize we're all selves. We're all adventurers.
You're a wizard, Harry.
All selves matter. We are the same because we're all on the same quest to do two things, purify and perfect. Same two. Right? Understanding and knowledge, the same thing. What will they tell us? You can't trust them. Their mind is deceitful. It's not truth. What are we seeking? The truth. Where do we seek it? In self-being or self-mind. But we're after the truth. But they're deceitful. They are, even if they have the appearance of rationality, don't trust them. It's a lie. It's fake news. Don't trust the left. Don't trust the woke. Don't trust the Muslims. Don't trust the immigrants. Don't trust the blacks, etc., etc. Forever. For ad hominem. What is the word? Ad infinitum. Finally, we have to get rid of them because their self is a poisonous influence. So they are subhuman, deceitful, and poisonous. Therefore, we have to kill them. Yay, we get to act out our injustice on them. So, what were the Jews called? Vermin. Can't reason with vermin. They don't want to be reasoned with, and they're poisonous influence. So not only can you not reason with them, and even if they try to, they're con artists or they're bullshit, but we have to kill them because they're vermin. Their self is bad. And we recognize in philosophy that that's fundamentally ignorant, that's wrong. We all share in the self-logos, and we're wondering about the self-logos. We've seen how significant the self-logos is. It's literally the development of philosophy. It's literally the self-logos applied through our understanding to the dialectic, to the beings, is that which purifies and perfects everyone, brings everyone.
You're a wizard, Harry.
to our truth. It's literally the destiny of man. The self-logos is what we want to awaken in philosophy. So anything that says otherwise is fundamental bullshit. Don't believe it. But it's part of the econ, right? Finally, truth, mind, knowledge, justice, beauty, that's all in self-mind. What do we all share in by being intelligent beings? Mind. Anyone who says, oh no, kill the Jews because they're subhuman, the blacks are monkeys or whatever the hell, even to this day, disgusting racism, is wrong, because we all share in mind simply by the fact that where does logos come from? From the one self through mind to us. So we want to, this is our purpose. This is what Socrates is saying. Hey, the whole act of purifying and perfecting ourselves, separating from our physical senses, is because we can only achieve real beings, ousia, the truth, and this mysterious self-phronesis in self-mind, in being. Our method is to become most like it and purify ourselves through the dialectic of the self-logos. So it's literally, these two are the fundamental two aspects, make it a dyad of philosophy. And once we achieve this, apparently he's saying once you're separated from yourself from the body, and you are able to separate from or purify and liberate yourself from the tyranny and the chains and the suffering and the pains and the desires of the physical body, what do you do? He says, collect yourself together and keep doing the self by self dialectic. Keep doing this even after you've reached that. What does that mean? Well, if we recognize that there is a self-triad, then we recognize this isn't the final destiny of man. Therefore, even when we're in this, what does this allow us to do? Philosophy. With less interruptions, pains, desires, intrusions, less, to use the quote from the text, pouring in and pouring in as calamities, clamoring in and driving us out of our mind. In other words, we reach there so that we can do this better. We do philosophy there. Reaching that state of self-mind allows us to do philosophy. What can that then open us up to? Going from, let's get rid of this picture, self-logos to the realm of being or truth, self-mind. But maybe that's the idea of phronesis. So that's a hypothesis. Maybe if we get there through the self-logos and through the virtues, we awaken self-phronesis. Therefore, we can do the dialectic and go to the one self. So what do we get told if we want to ignore true philosophy and become ignorant and mired in our suffering? The enemy is irrational. The enemy does not participate in truth and being. And their self is fundamentally bad and needs to be exterminated. To this, right now, we are having genocides by people who believe this crap, simply because they have not awakened philosophy. Simple as that. Doesn't get more complicated than that. Doesn't get more simple than that. And so what is it? Fundamental. Oh, you can't reason with them. Even if they did, they're fundamentally deceitful. They don't have the pure mind. They can't reach knowledge. And they must be exterminated because their self isn't meaningful. Their self is poisonous. So the Jews, they are vermin, right? Rats, right? Vermin, can't reason with. We wouldn't want to. And we have to get rid of them because they have a poisonous influence. The self is not a providential influence like we're seeing in the logos, but a negative one. So that is all inherent in the idea of evil. Evil justifies the destruction of that which is most important, philosophy. The logos and the dialectic to reach truth, liberate ourselves from our problems, perfect ourselves towards our destiny. Right? Evil is a word that can shut that shit down. Okay? So because evil is deceitful. Evil, you can't reason with evil because it wants bad things. Yes, the devil wants to trick you. Yes, the devil is the one you least suspect. Yes, the devil. There, you can't reason with it. Just kill it. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching unto war. That's what we sung when I was a little kid at church. So crazy. Not crazy. Completely understandable. Completely understandable. So long as you do it, apply dialectic to philosophy. You recognize the self-triad and you recognize the opposite. By the way, why do they teach the opposite of those things and teach evil? What motivates them? Easy, just jump into our dialectic. Well, what if philosophy doesn't exist? Oh, the people who teach the idea of evil, that teach that you can't do this. If philosophy does exist, you can do the dialectic to, you don't fear death, you can do the dialectic to remove problems and reach our highest goals. Through the dialectic, self-dianoia to each being, so that attains self-phronesis, turns your body around to the soul, acquire truth and reach being. Why can't you do that? Because I didn't remember learning that at Sunday school. Oh, because evil, that's why. You're fundamentally evil, you were born with original sin, and the everyone else is evil. Yeah. Why? Because they're concerned with eating and drinking, sexual stimulations. Hey, does the church have a problem with that? Are there a lot of rich people flying their golden jets in religions that teach the idea of evil? Are the people in the propaganda news networks telling us to fear each other and kill each other and fight each other and hurt each other? All people who are not talking about philosophy? Do they encourage this? And by the way, are they all rich bastards? Lots of ornaments, lots of shoes, lots of clothes, lots of sexual scandals, lots of eating and drinking. Are they all lovers of the body? And we can add lovers of the body, and we also have from the text lovers of honor. Do they want to get famous? Was it lovers of honor? And lovers of, what was it? Lovers of, should highlight it in the text. Lovers of riches and lovers of honors. Yeah. So we can recognize, just from doing the dialectic, putting the logos into the dialectic, we can recognize lovers of the body. Are they interested in the body? Shoes, ornaments, sex. Are they lovers of riches? Do all of those owners of the news networks and authorities within religion, do they love riches? And are they lovers of fame and honor? They want to be loved? Do they do advertising about how great they are? Do they look for simps? For the billionaires? So we can recognize, oh, we're engaged in this. Oh, why? Because of this. This is the motivation. So what's the cause? We go from the definition of the people who teach us evil to that which is prior to the definition, the cause. That takes a 4-term dialectic: definition, demonstration, division, synthesis, analysis. We can recognize right down here, how do we relate to each other? Oh, we kill each other, we fight each other. All of our civil discourses are all arguments and culture war bullshit, and kill ourselves, we fight and hurt each other. But we also fear death as well, which is really interesting, that we're acting out towards the very thing we fear the most. So we take that back to its definition. Why? Oh, the people who define our way of living are concerned with this way. They are lovers of the body, they are lovers of riches and lovers of honors. Philosomatos, soggy tomatoes. Where is it? Philosomatos, soggy tomatoes. Lover of cremated tomatoes. Philocrematos, and lover of honors. Philotimos. Yeah. And by the way, so we follow the dialectic from others to others problems we face in our world to its definition. What's that cause? And then we go to the cause of even the definition. Philosophy is not. The cause of human problems, according to this dialectic, is simply the idea that philosophy does not exist. It's this instead. So philosophy, philophrenesis, and philomathesis, the lover of wisdom, the lover of phrenesis, and lover of learning, becomes lover of the body, lover of riches, and lover of honors. An inverted triad. Philosometos, soggy tomatoes, lover of bodies. Philokrimetos, lover of cremated tomatoes, lover of riches. And philotimos, lover of honor. Timocratic. Interesting. So if we recognize that, hey, if you define the cause of the problems, you can see that you're defining what causes the problems to follow, but you can also look at the preconditions for the cause. What is the cause of even the cause? So there you go from the definition, from the 1, 2, 3, 4, this hypothesis, to that which is the cause of even all of those hypotheses. Now we have our 5 triad, a 5 skill tree. We go from our 4 skill tree of DDAS or SOs to our 5. What's the cause of these people who are the cause of the problems? Simple. False belief that philosophy does not exist. They didn't learn from the Phaedo. But fortunately, we are. And so, what's one of the tools they use to jump from the philosophical, if philosophy exists, dialectic, which can bring a civil harmony, cooperation, all of the opposites of this, so we can just take the opposites of this. This is another thing with the dialectic, because you can see it so simply. You realize that all of these, if you take the opposites, go over here. So what would be the world if philosophy exists? Of course, you don't want to put it in twice, because, you're repeating yourself, but you can recognize that the opposite applies. So if philosophy does exist, we would live in a peaceful world instead of a warful world. Our civil discourses would be that based on the dialectic. Cooperative, friendly, fun, habitual, reflection on the logos, reflection on the days of Socrates, reading this text, applying it in our lives, encouraging each other, seeing the sameness in our humanness and our quest for philosophy. That would be our civil discourse. It wouldn't be discordant. What's the opposite of battles? We'd be supporting each other, helping each other. We wouldn't be killing ourselves. We would be helping us live the best life. We wouldn't be fighting and hurting each other. We'd be doing the opposite of that. Supporting, nurturing, encouraging, acting providentially. We wouldn't fear death. Okay, so this is the world that we could create simply if we do this dialectic. What do you say, Owen?
Wow.
Pretty cool, huh? So, one of the tools they use is this idea of evil, which is not ancient Greek. We recognize our problems is a shadow, a distorted reflection. It's not something fundamentally sinister. It's not something fundamentally poisonous. It's not something fundamentally irrational that you can't reason with. And it's not fundamentally something innately untrue and deceitful and not good. So the anti-self triad is a way of understanding or defining evil. Curious?
Wow.
So, why do we go on that tangent? Well, we have often translated the word bad as evil because of the influence that these translators had, because they're humans too, in their life, from their Christian tradition or their Islam tradition or their Muslim tradition or any other, you name it. If it's fundamentally a religion based on belief, it probably won't support. It's likely, or it is often the case, that one that's ruled by authority, religions that have authorities, and often they're the people with the riches, right, and the fame. If they want you to follow them based on belief, then they don't encourage understanding and knowledge. The duad that we saw is essential for philosophy, understanding and knowledge. Where was our duad? Because if you understand it for yourself, do you have to believe someone who has a funny hat and who has a gold plane? Where are they? Here we go. Right? Of course not. Understanding and knowing. By the way, if you can verify your understanding for yourself in knowledge, is there any need for faith or belief in authority? Of course not. We would break down those unnatural, oppressive hierarchies. So it has to kill knowledge and understanding. How do you kill knowledge and understanding? You have to attack the self-logos, our self-mind, or being, or truth, and you have to attack the one-self. You are innately bad, original sin, not good enough, inadequate, not going to reach God, the cause of problems and whatever. You can't reason, you just have to have faith, and you can't experience truth or knowledge, because that would mean everybody can participate, but we have our little groups that are defined against each other. So if that's the case, you need a word that attacks that self-triad, evil. That's what evil is. That's the definition of evil. Supernatural, irrational, deceitful, so not true, fundamentally poisonous force. Evil. So, some of our translations are people who grew up in the human culture, and therefore, if they weren't not just defining the texts that were translating, defining, but they had to demonstrate it. The authors, the translators themselves should have been going through the process of purification in this way so that it wouldn't influence their translation. But that didn't really happen until now, because we're doing it. So yay for us. Right? So we can reach being, liberate, develop the self-logos, get rid of the anti-logos like evil. So let's go back into the text and look at this word. Okay, so we look at the virtues. So virility, so some sort of power and strength of will in our disposition. The virtue of sound-mindedness, that's the one. Are those who not disdain the body, but who take little heed or esteem lightly and take no heed of the body and live in philosophy. There's our philosophia, philosophy. So living is philosophy. Okay? Now the other virtue after you've kept your cool, that's the first virtue, courage. Now, do we think that death is the greatest of all evils? Now let's see if that word evil is actually evil, or if there is an influence from the mythology in the work of the translator himself. And again, we're not insulting the translator. We are all humans.
You're a wizard, Harry.
We're all on this quest. We all have problems. If we weren't, we wouldn't be born. We all are here to go through a purification and perfection, removing the anti-logos and developing the self-logos. We're here to both escape our fate and reach our destiny.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So it's not personal. But in another sense, it's the most personal because it's our quest, our personal quest, as well as the quest of all people. So it's the destiny of man. So let's convert the word evil into Greek. Copy it, paste it here. Gargon. 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 Gives me the way of pronouncing it. Put it in the dictionary. Vice. Baseness of spirit or cowardice or sloth. Okay, vice. So, let's zoom in. Vice. So there's the opposite of the virtues is vice. And when they say base, they don't mean it like based, like we mean it today is good. Base is like, based is bad. like, yeah, base is a word that before we use it to mean based in facts and good. Hey, that guy's based. He's telling the truth. So kakon, let's have a look at this one. Ugly. Oh, bad. It's bad. Right? Bad. Ugly. Mean. Base. Bad. Unworthy. Yeah, you can say evil in here, but again, we don't want to use the word evil because that's, well, we know why. It's the anti-self. It's a tool of oppression. Gotta get rid of that. Yeah, so kakos or kakon, or yeah, kakon is bad. Every time we see the word evil, every time we see the evil, realize it's not evil and think about the significance of evil in our world and how it relates to if philosophy doesn't exist. So, bad. Not evil. Frowny face. Oh. It says bad. I don't know if you can see it. It's bad, not evil. So, do we think death is the greatest of all bad things? Yes. Is it not the case and the brave among us, when submitting to death, submit themselves for fear of greater calamities? Oh look, calamities. Didn't say evils, but we can see kakon. Same word, kakon. For greater calamities. For greater evil devils. Hey, you submit yourself to one demon vampire for fear of Nosferatu. You don't want to be eaten by him. No, it's not evil. It's not evil. It's bad. That is so. Accordingly, then, they are brave by being afraid and out of necessity. Except the philosophers. Ooh.
Wow.
And yet it is most irrational to be brave out of some need and fear. Hey, you're not really courageous if you don't have a choice. It's a need. You're not really courageous if you're doing it out of fear. By all means. But what of the orderly among us? Is not... Okay, so just for the translation, selves has the three meanings and you can take it all ways, but as I'm reading it, I'll pick which one seems to fit the flowing of the conversation. But you can take it as all three, right? There's the specific, it, us, the honorific, and the oneself. Part of that discernment of which self is which is part of the puzzles. And that's part of how he writes as well. Gives us puzzles in that way. So that's just a quick aside. It might not be interesting. But now, what of the orderly among us? Is not their experience the same? For they are of sound mind, Socrates, out of a lack of discipline. Yet we claim this to be quite impossible, since the simple-minded experience of sound-mindedness, Socrates, turns out to be for selves equally like this, for fearing to be deprived of other pleasures which they desire. They keep away of some for sake of being mastered by others. So, even though they do indeed call being under the rule of pleasures a lack of discipline, but what is equally the case for selves if they master certain pleasures in order to be mastered by other pleasures? This then is like that which we mentioned just now, that in some way they have been made phronesis by a lack of discipline. Interesting. So, phronesis can apply to Socrates. Interesting. But he's saying, hey, just like you're not really... from the chat. Hi, welcome to the chat. Thanks for joining. Thanks for sharing. One thing they don't tell us is that we've got to let go of even philosophy to reach ultimate truth. Philosophy is just a manifestation of that truth within, ? What if we were presented with a brand new existence all this would not exist. So does it even now? That's a good point. So that would go under the category of what if philosophy doesn't exist eternally and immortally? That would go under this dialectic category. If philosophy exists according to death, and we also, Also, we have this idea that we've developed a dialectic of if the soul can exist out of the body. Where is that dialectic? Yeah. Right? So if philosophy is true, in the sense that we're defining what the word is means, then we can have noesis or direct intuitive knowing of each real being. We can share in that activity called ousia and have this virtue called self-phronesis. That's what we've seen. Now, that's different from what philosophy isn't. That we drag along our sense perceptions. It's just based on the body. So our thinking and reasoning is based on our physical body. So that means that philosophy is eternal, immortal. Anyone who recognizes that they can share in the logos, they can apply their... Okay, how do we do it? Over here. They can, if anybody, any species, at any planet, in any point of history, at any point of time, wakes up to or evolves to the level of intelligence with self-logos and applies it to themselves, that activity of self-reflection of ousia can recognize that they can share in dianoia of each of the beings with the logos. We call that the dialectic. And they can be purified and liberated from your troubles in the body, and you can acquire truth. Truth is eternal. It's not dependent on a person. It has an existence in the realm of being. That's what makes philosophy philosophy. Different from what philosophy isn't. Concerned with eating and drinking, sex, shoes, opinions, and so on. So philosophy is something that is eternal and immortal that we have to awaken. And if it's something that's inherent to the structure of reality, then in a billion years there might be a new species who, so long as they awaken intelligence, they awaken language for the logos, and they apply that to reflect on themselves, that's a triad, then they will discover philosophy. That's why we don't call Platonic philosophy, because that makes it sound like it's one philosophy among many, which is a opinion. Kant's opinion, Hegel's opinion, this guy's opinion, that guy's, Aunt Mary's opinion, Uncle Bill's opinion. Philosophy isn't one among many, it's just the truth. That's open to all. If philosophy doesn't exist, we will end up just fighting, civil discord, killing ourselves, fighting each other to promote our personal philosophy or our personal opinions that are going to be concerned with things of the body. That's what we just saw in the Phaedo. But there's another question of, well, what if we do use the dialectic, the activity and the structure of the logos to purify ourselves such that the divine self will then, what is the divine self? Separate from the pursuit, the contacting, the desire, the practice, the engaging and deserving of death, which is the separating of the soul from the body. True philosophy would be self-profound. Yes. And the word self in the Greek has the meaning of the honorific. So we talked about seeing self-phronesis, the highest kind of virtue. And we also talked about, let's jump into the text. So the word self has the meaning of the honorific. So we're looking for, look at how much we've highlighted. Self-justice. Do we say there's a certain self-justice and a certain beauty itself and goodness self? And any of these beings have you seen with your eyes? What about all the other things that have an existence in that realm of being prior to the realm of becoming, such as greatness, health, strength, and in one word, in one logos, the ousia. The ousia is the nature of those beings that are non-physical, but they are of mind, allowing us to grasp it with our mind. The ousia of all of them, whatever self happens to be. That which is most true of the cells is contemplated through the body? No. In fact, what we have to do is prepare ourselves to most accurately understand dianoia, understanding applied to being specifically, each self. This person will approach closest to the intuitive knowing, the direct personal experience, gnosis in the Greek, of each being. And then how do we do it? By approaching the being with our self-understanding, not with any sight or not dragging any sense perception, but their logos, their reasoning. They use the dianoia that purifies you yourself by yourself, and you try and track down each of the uncorrupted beings, beauty itself, justice itself, and that liberates and purifies yourself as far as possible from the eyes and ears and the sum of the body, for they trouble the soul and do not enable her to acquire truth and phronesis. Now we have a question. We don't know what phronesis is yet, but we're still puzzling that out. We've got a new clue that it's something to do with the virtues. So this is what philosophy is. And then he goes on to say, by the way, if you don't do this, the body will come clamoring in and befall us with disease and impede your chase for the beings in reality. It fills the body with passions and desires and a need for sustenance, and also your fears and illusions and foolishness. That comes from the association with the body. But you'll never find truth of reality, not the physical world, being and mindfulness. Instead, you'll get war, civil discord, and battles. And then he goes on to say, well, how do we pull this stunt off? How do we separate ourselves from the body? And he gives us this little yoga. That's a purification. We have to separate the soul from the body as far as possible. How do you do that? Accustom yourself to gather yourself together from all quarters and collect yourself by self out of the body, and then dwell alone as far as you're able, both now and in the future, that being liberated from the chains of the body. This liberation and separation of the soul from the body is called death. That's the death he's talking about, the philosophical death. Only those who practice philosophy in the right way. Hey, not these yahoos who say philosophy is my own personal philosophy about why I should have lots of ladies and lots of money and lots of fame. That's not philosophy. This is the practice of philosophy in the right way. We are eager to liberate ourselves, and this liberation is nothing other than the liberation and separation of the soul from the body. This is the study of and the exercise of the philosophers. That's it. That's it in its nature. Now you have raised another question that we've talked about. What if you do pull a stunt off? And you are able to, by the way, we have recognized that exercise we call dialectic. If you do pull that stunt off, and you are able to liberate from the physical world and enter that realm of being, do we have it here? Yeah. So if you do the exercise, freeing the self from the self, yes, you got it. And to add more specificity, freeing the self-soul from the self-body through the self-logos, using the dialectic. And he says that opens, that practice allows us to be receptive to a door being opened from the divine, which is in the realm of being. So we have these triads. Actually, let's go to where all the triads are. It's going to be fun to do it that way. So we develop triads as we go, so we can recognize. Here we go. The self-logos, self-mind, and one-self. But we could also say the realm of. We have being. Okay, let's make one. So we have this, but we also can recognize there's another triad. There's lots of triads, by the way. We collect them and we take them with us in our inventory. The realm of becoming, when the best we can do is develop this, that's philosophy. That prepares us, purifies ourselves, and makes us most receptive for this jump into the realm of being, in which there's truth. We call that truth, justice itself, beauty itself, greatness itself, all of the eternal beings that exist outside of space and time, so they're eternal and immortal. That's in the self-being or mind. But then the question is, well, what happens if we get there? Do we drop philosophy? Now, we've seen some clues, because in this little part here where he outlines the yoga of separating the soul from the body, he says, by the way, once you're out of the body, collect self together. Well, the activity of collecting self together, that's what we've been learning in the dialectic. We have this quote from Socrates' teacher, Parmenides. Collect yourself together, thyself, the highest part of yourself, together, by exercising more in that way that appears to be useless to the multitude, the dialectic, and it's called by them empty talk. For if you do not, while you are still young, the truth will utterly elude you. This collecting yourself together stands out to us in this yoga. And also the expression, collect self by self. That expression is the first part of the dialectic. So if we see the dialectic as, where's our structure of the dialectic on the board? The dialectic has 4 parts. So we have, where's one we've done? Here's one I prepared earlier. Right here, so here's one. We started at if philosophy exists versus if it doesn't exist. You have 4 parts. What can you say? Self itself. How does it function? Self to others. How do those others relate to themselves? Others to others. And then how do those others relate back to philosophy at the beginning? So we recognize collect self by self. That's the first category of the dialectic. So we've got a puzzle. Once we do pull off this stunt, what do we do once we are in the realm of being, once we are out of our body? And if he's saying collect yourself together, and he's using the language self by self, it may be he's saying bring philosophy with you, even to that place of true being. In fact, he seems to be saying philosophy is easier to do once you pull off this stunt, because you liberate from your problems. And what happens is, even if you, because we are enslaved to the care of our body, we chase need for sustenance. It keeps us busy. We have diseases. It impedes us. And he says, even if we do turn to some study of philosophy, in our search, the body falls in and presents itself in a clamor, pouring in and driving us out of our mind. So we're not enabled to self-behold truth by self. So it seems to be that he's saying, you want to do philosophy, you want to do the dialectic, it's going to be easier once you can pull off this yoga. So that's addressing a question, when do we drop philosophy? We may not ever drop philosophy, which is interesting, because he also says in his yoga, part of the collection from the body is to dwell out of the self, dwell alone by self as far as you are able, both now and in the future. Meaning this could be the kind of learning that we're here to do that even goes beyond this lifetime. Very different from acquiring shoes and clothes and fame and riches, all the other stuff. This could be something we can take with us in our evolution beyond this lifetime. So stopping the mind and allowing the truth to be our guide. Well, it wouldn't be stopping the mind, it would be using the mind to know the mind. In fact, that experience of being that we're interested in experiencing for ourselves can be understood as mind in the activity of knowing mind. And if the nature of mind is the activity of turning about and experiencing yourself, ousia is the Greek word for it. We have to include ousia because we don't have a Greek name for it. Then ousia is also the activity. If the nature is a turning about to know yourself completely, then the activity is also mind. So the activity, the doer, and the object are all one, allowing us for a complete ousia, or self-oneness. That's the realm of being. That experience is knowledge, according to Socrates. So we're using the mind to know the mind through the self-mind, through the logos. Maybe that's what it means. All we do is get in our own way by thinking about it. Once we stop, freedom is realized. Ah, right. A certain kind of thinking. That's the purification. There's a certain kind of thinking that is contaminated by association with the physical body. That's right. So if we can pull this stunt off and separate from our physical senses as much as we can, well, we're going to have less of this action. We're going to have less of our need for food. We can be doing our dialectic and contemplating the nature of the realities and reading this awesome text. So it's fun. You're not on your own. You can have it with friends without the need for a sandwich coming in and without getting a disease, because these things impede our chase for reality, our passions, our desires. I don't want to do this. I want to go chase some girl or whatever. Our illusions. I'm not good enough. Our foolishness. I'm going to go beat up Frank up the street because he called me a bad name. Our fears. Maybe it's not going to work for me. All of these things limit us. And by the way, if we're not pursuing this, which is a love of learning, philomatheus, this kind of learning, a love of philosophy, the experience of knowing, and phronesis, which we still don't know what phronesis is, we have, this is what he's saying. He's saying, look, our true learning is this. We are, we are this. We have a love of learning, this kind of learning. And by the way, one who loves learning is practicing and is studying, exercising, and practicing the art of death and dying. So we have a love of learning, philomatheus, a love of wisdom, that experience of knowing, but you have to have got there through the logos so you can recognize in that experience of ousia, there is a pattern. There is a paradigm. That's the logos. And if you use that in your actions, you can act in a wise way. So that's the significance of having this out-of-body experience by going through the dialectic. But also we have this curious, what the hell is phronesis? Because we're also a lover of phronesis. Socrates is saying, the thing that philosophers most seek is truth and phronesis. And you can only get that when you're dead. So he's saying, hey, tell my friends to follow me as quick as they can. But we know dead doesn't mean shooting yourself. In fact, it can't. He says, hey, you can't shoot yourself. That's violence against yourself. You're doing a tour of duty here. There's a reason why you're here. It's not your call. Wait for someone else to do that for you. But you can separate yourself from the body. So the bumper sticker that we're going to make is, philosophy is nothing, or to live well, to live in the right way, is to die lots before they bury you. Truth is when we ain't here right now, so how can anything happen? Only happens if we think it can. Right, so this starts with some sort of trust. Like this is Socrates, and we've got reason to trust him. We have these texts from Plato of his logos all the way along. There's, Socrates is the father of Western thought. He's the father of philosophy. And so we have reason to trust him, to think we can do this, to think that this is possible. And he's saying, hey, the many don't. In fact, when Socrates was 19, when he was just starting in philosophy, he was limited, and so Parmenides says, hey, by the way, your problem, Socrates, is because you're still young, you give heed to the opinions of human beings. And Zeno said, Socrates' student said, Socrates, hey, the many are ignorant that without this discursive procession through all of the beings, dialectic, it happens to be impossible for the intellect to hold on to the truth. So this is very rare, and this translation that we have is very new. So we have to kind of fight against or trust in this logos ourselves. So Socrates goes on to say, if the true philosophers talk in this way to each other, and you have to start by trusting it. Where is it? Here. The noble philosophers believe and say in relation to each other. So in relation to others is others to others. That's one of the 4 categories of the dialectic. If you want to know more about the dialectic, I'm posting these videos on YouTube so you can catch up. It's worth it. Believe and say these things. So you're right. We have to believe it's possible. But he goes on to say, everything we've just talked about, we have to repeat this to each other and believe it and say it to each other, because the many don't think this way. We're not raised thinking this way. We get a completely different mythology about what philosophy is. Very rarely do we say, hey, it's the art and practice of death and dying. That's how you really achieve phronesis. That's how you achieve truth. That's how you experience the knowledge of the beings. That's what you're after. And you'll go into your death happy that you're going to a better place. You reach your pure state. But not only do you say that, you have to, where is it? We have to affirm it to be true as well. So we have to start from trusting, but we have to apply it. We have to do the dialectic, because he said that's the way. This doctrine, Simmias, says Socrates, we repeat to each other and believe. So it starts with belief. But then you got to do it. What do you have to do? Prepare your dianoia, understanding of the beings. That purifies you. The purification is the separation of the soul from the body. And how do you do it? These 4 steps here. Those who do philosophy in the right way are most eager to liberate the self, separate the soul from the body. That's the study and exercise of the philosophers, and we call that dialectic. So we're wondering what this mindfulness is, because he says, by the way, we're a lover of mindfulness, for they yearn for mindfulness. One is truly a lover of mindfulness. We want to encounter pure mindfulness. The word is phronesis, so we want to know what phronesis is. Yeah, sure. You got an interesting story about death. So this is the essence of this text. He's been sentenced to death by the state for believing that he has a daemon, a spirit that communicates through the logos to benefit him, and the state doesn't like that. And so this is his last day before he's killed, and he's talking about this is what death is. He goes, by the way, I've been a philosopher. I've been practicing and studying this, and I've experienced death lots. In fact, if you're a philosopher, you want to follow me as quick as you can. But what is death? Purification from your troubles and from the physical body. And it's also that which you... Here's our notes. Liberation from the chains of the body, separation from the soul from the body. That was what we call death. Liberation and separation of the soul from the body. Yeah, so what's your story? And that's the dialectic. Self and the dianoia to each of the beings with the logos without any physical senses. That's the dialectic. Why do we care about the dialectic? Purifies and liberates the body and our troubles. Also, it enables soul to acquire truth and phronesis and reach each being. And also, we no longer fear death. So, and he's saying, look, okay, let's address the virtues. Sound, even-temperedness, courage, wisdom. Those are the three. And he says, and justice, of course, is the one above them all. Those who are even-tempered. No, he starts with courage. He says, hey, some people who have courage, right? Don't they think that death is the worst thing? Yes. Death is the greatest of all bad things. Yes. And some brave people submit to death because they fear an even worse thing happening to them. Yeah. So really, they're being brave out of fear of the worst thing and because they have no choice, out of necessity. But that's not really brave. And he goes, same thing for people who have sophrosyne or temperance. What's temperance? Temperance is managing your desires, the lower part of your body, inward desires, your outward moving, your courageous moving. So that courage is what you do in the world. You got an inward moving part of your soul. You want sandwiches. You got an outward moving. You want to do stuff in the world. And you have a reasoning part, right? So the reasoning part needs to understand this. Logos and direct experience of the truth, because that's what you want. That's the truth. That's your paradigm for thinking properly, reasoning well, the true model. So if you're desiring lots of sandwiches and you're outward, that's for yourself inwardly, and you're outwardly seeking fame or you want to be Instagram famous or something, and your reasoning part wants wisdom, then you're being pushed in like 3 different ways. And the bigger parts of your soul are going to win. But temperance, sophrosyne, is realizing, hey, everything you desire is because you think it's good. The highest good itself can only be experienced in the separation of the soul from the body and the direct experience of truth. That's good itself. That's goodness itself. So desire that. Hey, you want to do something honorable? This is the most honorable thing you can do, not being famous. So it's aligning the parts of your soul together for the highest good, the good of wisdom. That's temperance. So you're not fighting against your desires. You're not flagellating yourself like, oh, I want to kiss a beautiful girl. Naughty, naughty, I should be reading philosophy. It's not that. It's recognizing that everything you do, even if you're wanting a relationship, it's in pursuit of the same thing. Wisdom, the truth about the nature of reality via the logos, the dialectic. And he's saying, hey, there are some people who have, and that sort of a person, he says, does not fear death because they've understood it and they've experienced it. Understanding and knowledge, the 2 aspects of philosophy. Or one way of, dividing it into a pair. So he says, by the way, that's the consequence of if philosophy exists, how can you understand it in relation to death? It's a dialectic. You don't fear death. But he says people who are not in philosophy, but are lover of honors and the lover of the body and this sort of thing, if philosophy doesn't exist, fake philosophy, they're only courageous. They only accept death because they're afraid of worse things. That's not real courage. And he says, by the way, they're not ordered in that temperate way, even temperance, sophrosyne way. He's saying, hey, they're only mastering their desires because they want other desires. They're only, not eating all the ice cream because they want to look good so they can kiss a lot of girls. They're mastering one desire to be motivated by another desire. That's not true sophrosyne. And he said, by the way, they've been made mindful, phronesis, by a lack of discipline. They master certain pleasures in order to themselves be mastered by other pleasures. They eat the healthy food, not all the ice cream, so they can look good and kiss all of the girls. They're not really pursuing wisdom, so they're not mastering those pleasures for true Sophrosune. But he said that activity of not directing your attention to those pleasures is a kind of Sophrosune. So that goes into our question. We're adding that to our question. What the heck is phronesis? Something to do with the virtues. In the chat, I live in a community that is only 60 years old, and it has a cemetery that's completely full. Oh. They moved from a prior community that had 3 other communities that they say they've lived in for thousands of years. The thing is, the cemetery has only around 20 plus graves. So did we just start living or dying? Four communities now, but they were once one community. They're separated. The other communities are full cemeteries, as well as a couple have 2 full. Okay. So what's your hypothesis? The puzzle of the missing graves in the community. So I'm going to keep reading, but as you type up your hypothesis. So we only master certain pleasure in order to be mastered by others. That's not really temperance, sound-mindedness. Just like it's not brave to be brave out of fear. Fear of greater calamities. Interesting. So this could be a puzzle. This is the abduction. If you notice a pattern, but there are missing pieces, it's your job to fill out the missing pieces. So we have the 3 virtues here. He's saying, hey, temperance, Sophrosune, balancing the parts of your soul together, seeking one goal. If you're mastered, if you're not being pulled around by some desires because there's this other desire that you want, that's not really temperance. You're not really balanced and ordered in pursuit of wisdom. That's fake. Likewise, if you're doing something courageously, but it's out of fear and because you have to, not because you're holding on to the truth about what death is and where you will go when you die, and that's not really courage. So equally, we could say, well, if you're experiencing wisdom, because if we've noticed that he's doing this for 2, but there are 3 virtues, I wonder if we could do our own and say, well, if we seek wisdom, but the experience of the real beings, but we do it in a way that we don't develop the logos and the dialectic, that we are just doing it because this is going to give us the greatest pleasure. Right. Okay, pleasure is the key word here. So, temperance, we seek this pleasure, and that's why we master these pleasures. That's what he said. What's the opposite of pleasure? Pain. We take the pain of death and the fear of death. So he said we fear death the most. So we take the pain and the fear of death so we don't have other worse pains or fears. That's pleasure and pain. So we could apply the same to wisdom. If we pursue wisdom because it's the greatest pleasure, or it's the greatest pain, or we want to avoid the greatest pain, and not through the logos and the dialectic, we are doing it because it's the biggest kick. You might as well take a lot of acid at a drum and bass concert and hope to jump into that state of mind. But if you do it through the logos and the dialectic, you can develop a paradigm. You can purify yourself and you can perfect yourself. Purify yourself from your problems and your ignorance, perfect yourself in your understanding, and you can use it as a paradigm to live your life. Also, there's the question of maybe even when you reach this experience, you don't stay there, but you can go on to a higher level, go beyond being to the one self. That's our own little dialectic we just did by taking the pleasure and pain versions of temperance and courage, so we can have the elders always lived there, so thousands of years, 20 plus dead. So what do you think? Where are the bodies? When you have dinner, do they ever serve you a mystery stew and they don't tell you what the stew is made out of? What's your hypothesis for where are the bodies? Were they cremated? What are you thinking? So we saw in what we're seeing here, we saw there is a fake virtues, but relates to phronesis in a way, a kind of phronesis. We also mentioned there is phronesis of the body that we don't want. Phronesis. That's our question. And we had, you don't have any way of understanding where the bodies of thousands of people are. Curious, have you asked anybody? You can be Socrates or temperance through desiring greater pleasure, and you can have that's fake. You can have fake courage, by fearing greater pain or badness. No cremation. Interesting. Do you have a mayor of your town that you could ask? What do you make of this puzzle? So we see pleasure and pain, fear and desire playing out in the fake phroneses. And we have our own hypothesis. Well, maybe we can do our own for fake wisdom. Could it be out of a fear or desire? Because the experience of being is beauty itself and experienced as bliss. And And also, if we don't reach wisdom, we experience the pain and the badness of playing out our problems and our suffering of being attached to the body. So is he saying, hey, don't pursue wisdom because you're afraid of those things, or because it's the greatest pleasure? Do it for a higher reason than even pleasure and pain? That's our question. Okay, let's jump into the text. So, sound-mindedness is, you desire... Okay, so you fear being deprived of those pleasures, so you keep away from some for the sake of being mastered by others. So you're being under the rule of pleasures. So they do indeed call being under the rule of pleasures a lack of discipline. We're not supposed to be ruled by our pleasures. But what is equally the case for selves is they master certain pleasures in order to be mastered by others. This then is like that which we mentioned just now, that in some way they have been made mindful, phronesis, by a lack of discipline. So something about phronesis is mastering certain pleasures. Take that as a clue. That seems to be the case. O my blessed Simmias, this is truly not that which is the right exchange for virtue, by exchanging pleasures for pleasures, pains for pains, and fears for fears. Fears for fears. That sounds like a fun name for a band. And the greater for the less, just like money. But by that which is the only valid currency for which these things must be necessarily exchanged, mindfulness. Okay. So, phronesis is something that we exchange our virtues for. And on the one hand, by means of this, and along with this, they buy and sell all that which is being. As being. So when we reach the realm of being somehow, we exchange being and virileness and sound-mindedness and justice. That's the word justice. So sound-mindedness and justice are the two words that the Greeks used to collectively refer to the virtues. Why? Well, because sophrosoon, or sound-mindedness, is another word for sophrosoon. That was what we just heard. Sound-mindedness is to have all of the parts of your soul balanced together. So temperance is in all of the parts of the soul. Courage is the heart, knowledge is the head. Justice, equally so, is how you function with it. If you're doing your one function and only that function at all times, that's justice. So your one kind of balance is temperance. Your one kind of outward activity is courage. Your one kind of reasoning is wisdom. So justice is for all of them. So to refer to all of the virtues, you could say temperance because that's in all, or you could say justice because it's the functioning you have when you have them all as well. So that's dikaios, justice. Virtues are one's own beliefs. Virtues start as a beliefs. They come from the first few books of the Republic by Plato. Starts as a belief. But you go from beliefs to understanding. When you take those beliefs and you reason for yourself how and why they must be the case, you develop understanding. Once you understand something, you don't have to believe somebody else. But the understanding is itself just a stepping stone into experience. You have to put these virtues into play in your own world. Definition and demonstration. You need both. So these are the four virtues that you can get from, I think, the first 4 books of the Republic by Plato. They're fantastic. So loosely speaking, you can see there are three parts of the soul. There's the biggest part, the desire, inward. There's the outward moving. And then there's the thinking or reasoning. You could say that's your belly, that's your heart, and that's your brain. Of course, that's not the case. It's just a way of remembering it. So the three virtues are temperance, which is saying, hey, I'm going to have my desires ruled by my reasoning part, because what the reasoning wants is wisdom. Because if you desire something like inwardly, like you want a sandwich, you have to use your thinking and planning to know what kind of sandwich you should make and how to make it. You're outward moving. What do you want to do in the world? Well, you have to make plans with your reasoning. What kind of things do you want to do? Do you want to be famous? Do you want to go punch a cat? What do you want to do? Now, the virtue of temperance is realizing, hey, even though this is the smallest part, your desires have more force in your body. Align them like this, so that your reasoning part and what that wants, you also seek outwardly and you also desire. So you're unified together. That's a way of being. That's temperance. As you move outwardly, you're going to face ups and downs, pleasures and pains, fears and desires. If you can hold on to what your reasoning part says is true about reality, even when you're experiencing your highs and your lows, that's the virtue of courage. And now for reasoning, if you can develop your logos through the dialectic of the nature of the beings, and you prepare yourself through understanding for the direct intuitive experience, the mystical experience that we've been talking about, that happens when you separate your soul from your body, then that becomes a paradigm that you can use for wisdom to base your life. Why? Because if you want to desire good things, you seek beautiful things, and you also want to act in a just way. The paradigm, beauty itself, justice itself, goodness itself, exists eternally and immortally in this realm of being that's not physical. So you have to separate yourself from your desires, from your desire for sandwiches and food and clothes and Bugattis. You have to separate yourself from your desire for fame or to be well liked in the world outwardly, so that you can pursue this. That's the activity of philosophy that Socrates has been sharing with us in the Phaedo that we've been reading. Temperance is aligning yourself towards this one goal. You're unified. Courage is holding on to this in the ups and downs that you go through in your life. The virtue of wisdom is experiencing this with both understanding and direct experience. And finally, if you can pull this off, if you can organize yourself in this way, then you're doing your intended function, your purpose, you're fulfilling your destiny. That's called justice. Those are the four virtues. The ultimate truth erases all, including virtues, because everything's based on one's prior perspective. What if we just arrive nothing or has a meaning? All you're left with is virtues. So that is a certain way of thinking called nihilism. There is no meaning. Or relativism. Our understanding, our ideas are only based on our own opinions. hey, what's true to you is true to you, and what's true to me is true to me, and that's just based on our perspective. Hey, if I want to claim that I'm an astronaut, then if I believe it, then it's true. If you believe it's different, then that's just your opinion. You have your opinion, I have my opinion, and there's no way of verifying what's true. That's called relativism. It's a common myth that we have in our society today. But how long does it last? If you broke your arm, would you want to go to someone who just has their opinion that they can fix it, but they're like a homeless drunk? Or would you want to go to someone who you can verify actually doesn't just have opinions, but has understanding and experience of how to mend a broken arm? Is everything relative when it's something important? That's relativism. Now, what philosophy shows is, hey, you can have this belief that there's no meaning, nihilism. You can have, that's a way of thinking. Hey, nothing means anything. Even I don't really exist. Even me saying that doesn't really exist. That's nihilism. Make a different color. That's a certain way of thinking. We call nihilism. Now, that's a way of thinking, but it's also a state of mind. You feel a certain way, probably sad, depressed often. So we have thinking, or logos, and state of mind. State of mind, or knowledge, loosely speaking. Now you could say, well, okay, I don't think nothing exists. I think there's something, but it's all based on your own opinions. Relativism. Like you and I can talk, so there must be something real that we can have a shared language. But everything's just relative to your opinions. And that has a certain state of mind. You might feel kind of lonely. Maybe. There's another way of thinking. Okay. I mean, relativism is like, oh, beauty is just in the eye of the beholder. If you think something ugly is beautiful, then that's just as true as what I think is beautiful. But then there are some people who say, well, actually, no, if that exists, we wouldn't have supermodels. There is something that we call beautiful. That's objective. All right. But it's just an artifact of language. It's just a concept. It's a concept. It's an agreed upon concept. So it's not all relative to opinions. We do have an idea of beauty. You wouldn't call dog poo beautiful. And we wouldn't have supermodels if we didn't objectively think there's something beautiful. But it's just all concepts. Everything is just just concepts. But then you can think, well, actually, hang on a second. If that thing's beautiful and that thing's beautiful and that thing's beautiful, there must be some idea of beauty itself. Oh wait, there's another idea of like, oh, we're just all rocks. Materialism. We're just all billiard balls in space. We're just space dust. There's nothing more meaningful than that. In fact, everything that seems meaningful, like beauty, that can just be reduced to chemicals, just reduced to atoms. So we also call that reductionism. Beauty of a beautiful painting is just, it's just $2 worth of paints on a $10 canvas. That's all. So it's reducing everything meaningful to this lowest physical thing. And then there are states of mind where you can think, well, ways of thinking, well, there must be something called beauty, or there must be, like, let's say, the idea of two. 1 and 1 is 2. That's not something relative to an opinion, that will always be true. Hey, if there is another species in another planet, they'll hold 2 sticks up and they'll realize, oh, that's 2. So there must be some being greater than our physical universe. For there to be laws of the universe, those laws have to exist somewhere prior to our physical world. That's called metaphysics, prior to the physical world. They have a being. But there's a way of thinking where you say, well, there is a metaphysical world, but it's not connected to me. And you're sad. That's like saying, well, of course there must be something divine. There must be some intelligence creating and sustaining the laws of reality. But why would God care about me? Of course not. I'm just an ant to God. So all of these will have certain states of mind. You might be happy. That might be the highest state of mind, and so on. Often you get in groups. People who think there's a God, but you can't experience it. It's not you. It's different from you, and it's disconnected from you. It's fundamentally not connected to you. They often form groups. That's where we find religions and stuff. Then you can think, well, okay, I hear about this thing called meditation, right? And near-death experiences and spiritual experiences and mystic experiences and yogas and Buddhism and Hinduism and all these sorts of things. There's lots and lots of ways in which people have connected to the realm of being. And then you have a whole list of different ways of thinking about that. What is the realm of being? How do you connect with it? And then, of course, full connection. Maybe you can realize in that experience that you are the divine. Everything is consciousness. Everything is mine. And you have that experience of bliss or oneness. So these are all ways of thinking, and they all have their own internal structure. It makes sense. And we change between them in the ups and downs of our day. We might feel sad and depressed and think nothing is meaningful. And then we might feel happy because we realize, but I can have some toast. There's material, there is physical things, and they can make you happy. Or maybe you feel connected because you're in groups. Hey, when I join this religious group that believes in a higher power, I feel like I'm connected to something higher than myself. So we have ups and downs of states in mind, and they each have a way of thinking associated with them. And then, of course, you can have a way of thinking, well, maybe there's something before even being. Okay? So these are all right, separated from the self. So maybe that's one of here. It's like, I'm not connected. Yes, there is a higher self, but I'm not connected. That one here. Often you get involved in groups. Now, what philosophy says is, hey, the structure that applies to this whole thing, that's called the logos. The structure of ways of thinking and states of mind or direct states of experience, if there is a structure, a ladder, and you can hierarchically arrange them, these are better than those, and you can understand them, there must be a paradigm or a model that reality follows. That's the logos. And in philosophy, we want to master the logos so that we will go through ups and downs, different ways of thinking, different states of mind. We need to understand each of them to recognize, this is what's the problem with this one. This is the next one. This is how I level up. Right. To realize all is one. Now, what's interesting, so that's in the chat, somebody says one of those states of mind is to realize all is one. Now, that's interesting. This is where the logos comes in, because in this level here, let's blow that up. Let's make this bigger. Let's magnify this. There are lots of different spiritual traditions like Buddhism, Hinduism. Let's make it a bit bigger. There's like a Sufism, Hinduism, Buddhism. Actually, let's say Taoism. Buddhism. Now, these are all ways of thinking where they do think all is one. Oh, I got something happened. Oh, thanks for the follow. They all think all is one. But this is why it's so important to do philosophy. When they say all is one, what exactly do they mean? Do they mean a one that is the whole of all of the parts of the universe? That's a kind of one. Do they mean one of everything, even the non-physical universe? Do they mean the realm of being is a oneness? Do they mean all is the empty one of nirvana? Or do they go even further to Parmenides, Socrates' teacher? If you follow on YouTube, you'll see we've got a series on Parmenides where we go into his one self, where he describes a kind of one that doesn't even have existence. So these are all different kinds of one, and they each have their own spiritual experiences, meaning there's a ladder that you can understand each of them. That model for understanding is Parmenides' hypotheses. Because each of the different kinds of ones that you can think of and apply to yourself, God, and the universe, he covers all of them. That's Parmenides' hypotheses. So if you think you're a kind of one where the kind of one that we all are is nothing, that's nihilism. The kind of one is just an opinion that you have, just a concept, relativism. The kind of one is just a physical one. It's like a big rock. We're just in a physical world. That's materialism. And so on, until you get onto these divine kinds of ones in the different spiritual traditions. The spiritual traditions that to do with the spirit. You have all these. So we've been reading the Phaedo, where he's saying you need to transition into this realm where you can separate the spirit or the soul from the body, the physical world. Now you enter the realm of being. But our question is, well, what do we do when we get there? Well, if there is a hierarchical level of development we can level up, then there is development up that ladder that even applies to the spiritual. Yes, you can say, oh, there's a development. You start depressed and thinking nothing is meaningful. You start nihilistic, and then you start to think, and okay, there must be something. That's relativism. And then you get into physics and science, and okay, there's materialism that I can use to make computers and stuff, and so on and so on. There's a development. But then you get into the spiritual. You get into religious groups. Oh, there is a divine, but I'm not connected. But then you realize, oh, you can connect. Now, if you climb this ladder through the logos, that's philosophy. So you can say philosophy is the complete and best, and therefore best, spiritual tradition, because it's states of mind, and thinking tradition. It's both the logos, our reasoning, and our consciousness, nous. So philosophy, therefore, is the best and most complete intellectual and spiritual tradition altogether. And even when we do pull off this stunt of separating the soul from the body and go from the physical into these, Sufism, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, and so on, there's lots. You want to realize, well, okay, I hope I can take with me the logos so I can climb this ladder, go into the oneness experience deeper and deeper and deeper, and maybe ask the big question, what is experiencing it? Hey, if you realize all is oneness, all is pure oneness, something has to be experiencing it. What is experiencing it? Or if this is pure being, pure existence, something had to create it. What is creating it? In philosophy, we recognize that question is, so you're saying, what is the cause even of the divine, or what caused God? In philosophy, that's the question, what is the self? That's where we're going. That's why philosophy is so cool and so important, because we all go through these states of mind all the time. We have ups and downs. By the way, holding on to what the logo says is truth about reality and the self in the ups and downs is the virtue of courage. You have to be doing the work of philosophy, reading this text, which is fun, which is the most fun thing you can do, I think. So I hope this answers your question about what philosophy is. So it sounds like in the chat you've got a lot of different opinions, like a lot of different theories. So it sounds like sometimes, like you talked about everything just being concepts, but then sometimes you talked about there being everything being one, so you're up in this realm. But that's what it means to be human. We have a whole bunch of these that we go in and out of each day, and every personality is different. But if you recognize that you can understand it, and you can use that understanding to navigate yourself, that's the virtue of wisdom. That's your reasoning part. It's the highest part of the soul, but it's also the smallest part of the soul. If you realize you're going to dedicate your life to it and arrange yourself, your desires, and your outward movements according to wisdom, that's the virtue of temperance. Socrates. If you hold on to what you're learning in wisdom in the ups and downs of life, that's courage. And if you have all of them together, you will function as a human being, as a unified being, doing your intended function. Intended function at all times. That's justice. So the justice is the highest virtue that requires all of the other virtues. But you could say temperance is doing your intended function for your desires. Courage is doing your intended function for your heart. Seeking wisdom through the logos is doing your intended function of your mind. So justice is in each of them individually, but also it's the way of being that results from all of them. So that's a little crash course in the virtues. Okay? So let's use that and take that back with us for our puzzling about the text. So all those virtues, exchanging pleasures for pleasures, pains for pains, fears for fears, the greater for the less, it's just like money. But that which is the only valid currency for all these things that all must be exchanged is for mindfulness. So all that work, you start with trust or belief from the text, and then we understand it and we apply it. It becomes ours, and then we experience it. Hopefully we can do this separation of the body as much as we can to have understanding and knowledge, wisdom. Hold on to it at all times, courage. To organize yourself to seek it at all times, and desire it and want it at all, above all, temperance, and to function with it as your model in everything you do, justice. That's something you put into yourself through activity and returning to this over and over again. But he's saying, hey, you have all those things as a kind of currency, and what do you want to do with all that? What's the point of developing all these virtues in your life? Exchanging it for phronesis. But what the heck is phronesis? Let's go to our notes on phronesis. What is phronesis? It's to do with comprehending truth. You can have phronesis of the body, but you want self-phronesis. You can have fake phronesis by what was it? Oh, okay. So maybe when we say they have phronesis for a lack of discipline, they say, wait a minute. Somewhere they have been made mindful by a lack of, it's in quotes. So this might not actually be phronesis. It might be the appearance. So we can't say there's a fake phronesis of fake temperance. So let's take that note out. That's unclear. They've been made mindful, but they're not really mindful. But it's that which the only valid currency for which we exchange for mindfulness. So we exchange currency, exchange the virtues for. So that goes into our notes. And on the one hand, by means of this and along with this, buy and sell all that which is being, also being, virile, sound-mindedness and righteousness. So that's temperance and justice. And collectively the true, interesting. So we could say, okay, what does he mean by being and virile? Sound-mindedness and righteousness, and collectively are true virtue united with phronesis, where the pleasures and fears and all other such affections. Okay, now, being and virile. I just recognize something here. If there are four virtues, and he's saying that the virtues are exchanged for mindfulness, sound-mindedness is just sophrosyne. Justice is just justice. But we have the virtue of courage. Maybe someone who has the virtue of courage, another way of talking about it is virile, manly. It does make sense. The excellence of courage, you could say someone who has courage is brave or virile. Because the courage part of yourself is the power part, the middle part. And, okay, so let's have a look at this. Let's put it onto the board. From the chat, know thyself, know all. These guys got their knowledge from self, so all is one in a way that we have all the same access to this great knowledge. That would be what would follow. Know self and know all. So we will have access to it, which means if we can all access knowledge, then we can be supporting each other. We have a shared quest.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So what's really curious here is we have these three virtues. Let's bring them down to our triad skill tree set down here. Let's add the virtues. We have wisdom, courage, temperance. Temperance. Now, and then we have justice, of course, on top. He said, by the way, the virtues. He named justice. He named temperance. But then he said being and virile, which means lots of vitality. Now, what's curious is he didn't say wisdom and courage, but he did say being and virile. The power is the vivific power or vivific. So he said this, and this. So here we see Socrates laying the skill trees on top of each other. He's using these to represent these. So this tells us two things. It validates our idea of understanding the skill trees and the triads. It also might be a clue. In order to understand what this phronesis is, he might be saying, hey, do this, because I'm naming 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of course. But we can understand wisdom. What's wisdom? Apprehension of true being. What does true being have? The logos, which means it's understandable, which means you can use it as a paradigm. By the way, courage is the inner part of your soul, the outward moving. What do you need to move outwardly in the world? What does your heart seek? Well, you need power, you need vitality to have will. Power or vitality. So we can see that the three virtues fit with the triads. Wisdom is knowledge and understanding of being. Courage is a way of acting with will and vitality outwardly in the world. And temperance, we could say, well, it's a kind of activity. It's how you align your activities, your desires, such that they are guided by wisdom. So that's cool. That's cool, because otherwise, why would he say that you trade the 4 virtues for phronesis, but only mention 2 of them, and then bring in vitality and being? Doesn't make sense. Unless you recognize he's playing the game we're playing. Wow. That's pretty cool. It also might be a clue. Keep that in mind. So it's by means of this and along with this that we buy and sell all that is being, virile, temperance, and justice. Collectively are true virtue united with mindfulness. So if we buy and sell the virtues, it's by means of mindfulness. And along with mindfulness. Interesting. So we want to have the virtue that most brings us mindfulness. Phronesis is the word. True virtue united with phronesis, where the pleasures and fears and all other such like affections be added or subtracted. But on the other hand, very different is such a virtue that is exchanged for one another without mindfulness. That we talked about. You want temperance so you can exchange it for a greater pleasure. You want courage so you can exchange it for avoiding a greater fear, a greater pain. By being that which is a certain outline of a shadow and possessing neither soundness or truth. Interesting. So phronesis includes soundness and truth, and is truly fit for slaves. Then since the truth is truly a purification from all such things, are not sound-mindedness and justice and virility and self-mindfulness, self-phronesis, a certain rite of initiation. Interesting. He's got temperance, he's got justice, he's got virility that we saw as courage, but he's replaced wisdom or being with self-mindfulness. Interesting. So if wisdom relates to being, and also phronesis relates to truth, and truth is also related to being, then wisdom might be so phronesis might be the leveling up of wisdom. That's a leveling up noise. He said, look, these are the 4 virtues. By the way, I'm going to use vivality instead of courage, and I'm going to use being instead of wisdom. Why would he do that? Well, it could be because he has to create a common term. Let's work it out. So he said he didn't list, he could have listed all 4 of them, but he didn't. He said, look, I'm going to go into this triad for these 2. Our question is why? Well, if he might be saying, look, wisdom can be understood with that triad. Can be understood with all of these triads, probably, right? In some way. That's the nature of triads, but I'm pulling out this one in particular. But then he went ahead and said, by the way, the certain rite of initiation is having temperance, courage, but I'm going to use the word vivivik, justice, but I'm leaving out wisdom and I'm having phronesis. Our question is why? How could he go from wisdom to phronesis? The answer might be why he brought in a common term, being. That might be why he brought in the other skill tree, the other triad, the other branch of the skill tree. So wisdom is to being, is to phronesis. So phronesis must have some relation to, like wisdom is to being as phronesis is to being. So there's some connection between wisdom and being, and some connection between phronesis and being. And the certain rite of initiation is you keep this, you keep this, you keep this, but you swap that for this. So whatever we have learned wisdom to be, and loosely speaking for the sake of having something to work with, we talked about having the logos and dialectic about the beings. That also opens the door or makes us receptive to the self-divine, to have the experience of that, giving us both dianoia plus nous, or noesis, or oisia, allowing us to apprehend the truth. That could be wisdom, but maybe those two come together in some way to give phronesis of being. Quite a puzzle he is laying out for us here. Let's keep reading. The truth is truly a purification of all such things. Are not sound-mindedness and justice and virility and self-phronesis a certain rite of initiation? And it is likely that those who establish these very mystic rites for us were not inferior persons, but in fact were speaking in riddles. Is he pointing out this is a riddle? Was this the clue for how to solve the riddle? Maybe. They were speaking in riddles long ago by saying that whoever should arrive in Hades uninitiated and unaccomplished in their purpose. Okay? From the chat, as long as we look outside for answers, all it leaves is believing. Once look within, knowing is obtained and relieves all, including fear. Once you know, you have no need for believing. Well said. Well said. And Socrates is providing us the method. How do we look within? Certain development of the virtues, number one. Certain activity of the philosopher, which is what? Trying to separate yourself as much from your physical body, including all of this stuff. Fighting, war, illusions, fears, passions, and all that sort of stuff. All the things that distract you from philosophy, so you've got no leisure for philosophy. Purifying yourself from your problems and your physical body, and perfecting yourself through the practice of the dialectic is a kind of method of separating yourself from your body, which is purification, which is like dying, by the way, which is death. Practicing that, and even in that out of the body, doing the dialectic there. In fact, it's easier to do philosophy once you're separated from the body. So that's good news. Good news. I get some balloons, I get some fireworks. So that's our way of realizing. So it's moving from belief to belief in Socrates. That's a different kind of belief. By the way, that's what mythology does. Mythology can direct your beliefs. So your beliefs from your upbringing, your society, your family, your church, give you certain opinions about how to live your life, about how to die, what happens after death, what is God, what are you, and how do you do philosophy. We want to purify ourselves from that, as well as purify ourselves from our body, and perfect ourselves through the learning of the Logos. And Socrates says, by the way, I'm not just going to explain it in detail, I'm also going to mythologize it right at the beginning. He says, hey, it is fitting, since I'm about to journey there after I die, to this place, so to thoroughly examine and mythologize about the journey to that place and what kind of place we think self is. When we can pull this off, this death, we go to a place called self. And we are examining it. That's what we do in philosophy, the dialectic, understanding it precisely as we can, but also making a myth about it, make stories about it. Take all of these terms and make a character. He uses his own characters, but he also uses the characters from Aesop. So you can, if you like Garfield, make a Garfield comic about it, as a way of remembering and communicating these things which we want to practice. So yeah, going from belief to your own understanding through the dialectic, to directly experiencing the self when you can pull this off, knowledge. That might be wisdom because it's the experience and understanding of being. And then if you have done this and you've practiced it well, that means if in order to do this, you have to desire to do it. That's temperance. Desiring to find wisdom. That's great. Lover of learning, lover of philosophy. Temperance. Hey, to hold on to what this says, even though, you go up and down in your feelings and your thoughts throughout the day, that's courage, developing courage. Look, I feel like there's no meaning. I feel like nothing exists, but I've been learning the Logos and it says there is a being, there is something that exists. So I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to trust the Logos. That's courage. So you've got temperance, you've got courage, you're developing wisdom. And by the way, I'm going to use what I learn how close I am to wisdom in my own understanding, starting with beliefs, but then understanding and then knowing. I'm going to use that in everything I do and seek that in everything I do. That's justice. So if you're doing this, you are graduating from beliefs through understanding to knowledge, and then the virtues, giving you wisdom and justice. And you don't have to believe anyone else. In fact, you can help others who are stuck along the way. Philosophy is a two-person game, dialectic. From the chat, freedom from even that thinking that you need to be or do anything in order to receive what you already are. So makes all obsolete. I guess sometimes we need a starting point, and that's where the teaching is helpful. Even those need to let go in order to find your truth. Right, so what we're letting go of is our false mythology, our ignorance, our false images about the truth. But what we're carrying with us is the excellence of our thinking. So we're not letting go of all thought. That would be kind of nirvana. That would be a Buddhist idea. All thinking is bad. Or nirvana or nihilism. Get rid of all thinking. No, thinking is our way. That's the logos. Because, by the way, if you do experience knowledge, don't you want to understand what you're experiencing? And by the way, if you haven't used your thinking to get rid of your false beliefs, and you grew up thinking that the devil is out there, maybe you experience this other world and you're afraid of it and you run away from it and you run back into your body because the devil's or something. So you have to purify your incorrect thinking and perfect your true thinking. Going from false beliefs, that's what you get rid of, to true beliefs. And then you elevate from true beliefs to understanding, and then into the direct experience. And if that's of being, maybe he's saying, hey, you know what wisdom is? Maybe that's what wisdom is. But then he's saying, hey, let's elevate that to phronesis. This might be a riddle. What the heck is phronesis? Let's go back. Because we're a lover, one who is truly a lover. All the way through, he's been calling us a lover of mindfulness, a lover of phronesis, right there. And here, all our life as philosophers, we've yearned for phronesis. Everything we do is looking for, we want to encounter pure phronesis. If we don't, we'll become a lover of the body, a lover of riches, a lover of honors. Boo. We want to take no heed or esteem lightly the body and live in philosophy. We don't want to have fake phronesis, fake temperance by mastering one pleasure so we can get other pleasures. Right? Or fake courage, accepting death because you don't want to be tortured or something like that. In fact, what we want to exchange our virtues for, being, virility, even-temperedness and courage. Right, in the chat, yes, you want to purify yourself from the destructive thought. And we can do our own exercises on the dialectic and say, well, what happens if philosophy does exist, and what happens if it doesn't exist? We've done one already on what happens if the soul is able to separate from the body. These are just notes. So when you do a dialectic, you have to create two what-if universes. What if the subject exists, and what if it doesn't? What if the soul exists alone, separate from the body? Our first category is self by self. What can you say about the subject, the soul itself? It's knowing, direct intuitive knowing of ousia, of each of the beings. How can you say it functions to another? How does the soul function towards us if it can be separate from the body? It will purify us. It will liberate us. It will now enable us to acquire truth. But also at the same time, we want to be doing a what if universe of what if it doesn't exist? What if this doesn't exist? What can you say about it? Then we're always dragging along our sense perceptions and the body with our reasoning and our understanding, our logos and our dianoia. Boo. How will it affect us? How will the soul that's always attached to the body relate to us? It will trouble the soul. It's a corrupting agent. We'll never sufficiently get what we desire. What do we desire? Truth and this thing called phronesis. Don't know what that is yet. And then others to others. How do we relate to other people if it doesn't exist? If philosophy doesn't exist? Destructive thought. So you can take this, and if you've got this the category of the dialectic, which is this. If it exists, if X exists, and then that's SAA and SAB. If the subject doesn't exist, and you have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in each, what can you say about the subject itself? How does it function towards another? You can pick whatever other you want. How does that other relate to others? And then how do they relate back to the subject? So if philosophy exists, what can you say about philosophy? What can you say about how philosophy functions towards us, let's say? Then how do we relate to our friends? And then how do we relate back to philosophy after we go through this journey? That's a dialectic. So you've said, hey, destructive thought. That would go under here. 1, 2, 3, 4. If philosophy doesn't exist, what can you say about it? It's destructive thought. How does it function towards us? It destroys our well-being. It destroys our thinking. It destroys our state of mind. So that's what can you say about the subject itself? Self to self. How does it function? How do the others? So how do we relate to our friends? Hey, we might fight each other or disconnect. And then how do we relate back to philosophy? We might hate philosophy because it's just destructive thought. So I encourage you to take your insights that you're sharing in the chat, build your own, have a Word document open or something, and build your own what if universe. What if it exists and what if it doesn't? And follow this. Why? Because that's the exercise. That's what Socrates is saying we should do. Oh, and he said, by the way, after you've done that, take all of these things, take your subject, whatever you chose as the subject, the self, and whatever you chose as the other, and maybe whatever you chose as this other, and make a character. Make SpongeBob. And make this Patrick. And make this other, make it Squidward. And create a story. That's mythology. Make a story, make this act 1, make this act 2, make this act 3, and so on and so on. That's adding fun narratives and stories into your dialectic on whatever you want to understand. That's what Socrates is encouraging us to do. Isn't that cool? And that's a really good way of creating art, but it's also a really noble use of art. Like, why not use art to communicate that which is most significant and that which elevates you to your true destiny? Okay, so we want to exchange. There's a certain rite of initiation. Yeah, I'm glad you think it's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. It's the best game in town. In fact, it's the only game in town. If you start to realize this, you'll realize, hang on a second. Every Marvel movie has been trying to do this, but they've lacked the logos. They haven't read the Phaedo. They don't know the truth. So their characters kind of fizzle towards Act 2 or Act 3. Interesting. Socrates says, hey, let's find it. He says, by the way, my last couple of days in prison, I've been getting dreams, commands by the muse through dreams to make music. I thought it was encouraging me to do philosophy because philosophy is the greatest music. Music can mean poetry or whatever. Right, yes, infinite possibilities. Absolutely. And so it's commanding me. I thought, okay, maybe it was cheering me on, but actually it's wanting me to make popular music, make poetry and music that everybody can share in. So what I have been doing is I have been composing myths, not just discourses, not just philosophical logoses. I've also been doing myths. So because I'm not really familiar with myth making, I've been using the myths of Aesop. So that'd be the equivalent of us stealing SpongeBob and using SpongeBob, or Spider-Man, or characters from a video game, Sonic. That's the fun of the dialectic. And you can choose whatever you like. So you could go, okay, I want to explore, I'm really interested in this thing called knowledge, truth. I want to know truth. So I'm going to make that the subject. But so what's the best idea to reflect on truth with? Because I've got the first category. What can I say about truth itself, the subject itself? But then how does it relate to something else? You know what I like? I like the idea of infinity. So I'm going to make infinity the self, the idea of infinity in being the other. So the second paragraph is going to be how truth relates to infinity. If, oh, and by the way, this is for if. The first part has to be if it exists. If truth exists in being, in the world of being, so eternally, immortally, but also if truth does not exist. So what kind of a universe if truth doesn't exist? What can you say about truth? Just opinion. So self to self. If truth doesn't exist in universe B, you got universe A, what can you say about truth itself? Opinion. It's lies. It's concepts. It doesn't have an existence eternally. Just concepts. Right? But then over here you can say, you have to say, well, what if truth exists? It is eternal. Like you said, it's open to all. And then you take a character and you talk about SpongeBob, and you represent him in this way. But then you can say, okay, I'm also like infinity. So self to other could be, how does truth relate to infinity? Oh, well, that means infinity isn't delusion, but if infinity exists, how does truth relate to infinity? You can have the experience of truth as infinity and know everything, know all. Right? And by the way, all of your understanding of truth and infinity and knowledge has to come from Plato, from a text, or the Platonic philosophers, the ones who write about the logos. So that's why we're reading Plato's Phaedo, because these are people who've done this and they have these experiences and they're communicating the logos to us. Also, we get communications from the logos through our dreams, as we just saw from Socrates. So what happens is, if you create a universe and now you've got truth relating to infinity and what follows, you're improving your understanding of infinity, you're improving your understanding of truth, and you're exercising yourself in a dialectic. And then you can make it into a myth and create awesome art. So that's what we're being encouraged to do in the Phaedo. This puzzle about the rite of initiation. Righteousness, virility, self-phronesis, and temperance is a rite of initiation. Mystic rite. They were speaking in riddles long ago that by saying whoever should arrive in Hades uninitiated and unaccomplished at their purpose shall lie outstretched in a barbarous bog. Oh my goodness. Whereas the one who arrives there having been purified and perfected, there we have finally our word of perfection. We've been talking about purified a lot, but now we have the pair, purified and perfected. There's our pair, there's our 1 and 2. Purifying ourselves from the negative side of the dialectic. What if truth doesn't exist? What if infinity itself doesn't exist? What if knowledge doesn't exist? What if philosophy doesn't exist? What if you can't separate yourself from the body? You purify yourself from that, SAB, or your sequel, and perfect yourself through SAA. Perfect yourself through the dialect of what if it does exist? If you've been doing this, you will dwell with the gods, and you won't lie outstretched in a barbarous bog in the afterlife. For those concerned with the mysteries surely say, on the one hand, many are the thrisis bearers. Many are the thrisis bearers, and on the other hand, few are the inspired mystics. Okay, this thrisis is a staff. So we would say, many are the ones who carry a staff, but few are the actual wizards, the actual inspired mystics. What does he say? Hey, many people call themselves philosophers. They carry the staff, but few have actually gone through this purification and perfection and can dwell with the gods in the mystic experience. That's a cool quote. Many are so I like the word staff here. Many are the staff bearers, but few are the inspired mystics. Which also tells us something about what philosophy is. Hey, this activity of purifying and perfecting through the dialectic, without developing the virtues, by not associating with the physical senses as much as we can, makes us an inspired mystic. Isn't that interesting? So you can say philosophy, according to Socrates, is a mystic tradition, but not a fake one. You're not just a staff bearer. Cool.
Wow.
But these are, according to my opinion, none other than those who have practiced philosophy. There you go. There's a confirmation. Practice philosophy. You won't be a blowhard carrying around a staff, pretending to be a philosopher. You'll be an actual inspired mystic. If you've practiced philosophy correctly, that's what we've been seeing. And surely then in my life, as far as possible, of which I left nothing unfinished, but in every way I have been eager to become. Thus, if ever I have been eager to accomplish anything in the right way, on arriving there, we shall know for certain, in a few hours, God willing, as it appears to me. This then, O Simius and Cebes, is my defense. This is my defense of philosophy. By the way, that word we saw is not the word defense. It's an account. Let's bring in the actual Greek. All right, it is defense. Apologume. Before it was an apology. Whoops. Before it was an apology, but it's actually defense. Yeah, so this is my defense. So he said, hey, look, I'm going to give a defense about where I'm going and how I feel about where I'm going. And it's a defense of philosophy, because he's in prison because he was just at a trial where they didn't accept his defense of philosophy. They didn't like what he was doing. He didn't convince enough people anyway. That's why he's been put to death. So, the saying goes, many are the staff bearers, but few are the inspired mystics. But, in my opinion, the true inspired mystics are those who go through a rite of initiation, who trade their virtues for sound-mindedness, righteousness, virility, and self-phronesis. And wherever we go when we die, we won't be outstretched in a barbarous fog, because we've been purified of what's false and perfected in what's true. And this is those who have practiced philosophy correctly. So, if ever I have been eager to accomplish anything in the right way, on arriving there we shall know for certain. For a few hours, God willing, as it appears to me, this then, O Simmias and Cebes, is my defense, that I am leaving yourselves and my masters here, without being perturbed, nor without any complaint, by being reasonably led to believe that there, no less than here, I shall find good masters, as well as good friends. But the many do not trust in this. If then my defense is any more persuasive to you than to the Athenian jury, then it did go well. Right? Good masters and good friends there. And I hope I've been more persuasive to you than I was to the jury who sent me to death. So this is what he's saying. He doesn't know for sure, but he's not disturbed, and has no complaint. Why? He's been reasonably led to believe that he shall find good masters and good friends where he's going. And we also saw earlier in the text, he began his defense. He said his doctrine. He said I will try and defend more persuasively. This is the start. This is opening. Better to you than to the jury. From the one hand, I am not resenting death, because I think I will be present with those gods that are wise and good, and later with human beings who have completed life that are better than those here. He says, hey, that's why I'm not upset about dying. Better gods who are wise and good, and humans who have completed life and are better people. I shall be in the company of gods who are good masters. Be well assured. Similarly, through these doctrines, the result is that I am not resentful. I'll be of good hope. There is something in store for those who have completed life. And just as it's been said from ancient times, it's much better for the good than the corrupt. That's the opening, and now we've got to the end. He wanted to make a case, a defense for us, that he'll be with better gods, wise and good gods, and with better humans than we'll find here. And he finished by saying, that's my defense. I hope it was persuasive, and I hope I persuaded you that I will be with good masters, those wise and good gods, and with good friends, those better humans who have completed their life here. And we might recognize that as done our job, fulfilled our destiny, sufficiently purified ourselves from our ignorance, and perfected ourselves in the logos and dialectic, which is our task as human beings. When we complete that, it's a certain initiation where we go from the virtues of wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, to justice, courage, temperance, and phronesis. So there's a leveling up of that wisdom. That's a certain initiation that happens as a result of our purification and perfection. In this way, the art and practice of death and dying through the mastery and exercise of the dialectic without the use of the senses, we will escape the barbarous bog that is awaiting people who don't do this in their lifetime, and we will become true inspired mystics and not just staff bearers, and that's the practice of correct philosophy. And as a result, I'm going to be with good friends and good masters, wise and good gods, and humans who have also completed this quest, human quest, our quest, the quest we're all on, our destiny, what we need to awaken in our lives and for our species, the quest of philosophy. So we shall live well by the art and practice of dying well and living in that way. And we will be happy where we go that we are going to good masters and talking with good friends. Hey, maybe you're going to have good conversations with good friends because you've got a lot of practice in the dialectic while you've been here. You won't know until we go there, but we can practice going there. That's part of it. You don't have to wait till you cark it to experience that, which is why Socrates says, tell the good philosophers like my friend Uvenos to follow me as quickly as he can. He doesn't have to kill himself. You can separate your... In fact, that's what philosophy is. There's a better conversation happening in that realm with better people, more into it, and you can do it well. You're going to be less distracted, and you're going to find wise and good gods and masters there. So, hey, why would I be afraid? I'm actually in good spirits about the whole thing. And I hope this defense has convinced you, says Socrates. And if you're watching along, I hope it's convinced you. I hope it's given you questions. I hope it's given you puzzles. I'm still curious about this phronesis thing. But yeah, was it convincing? Was Socrates' defense as convincing for you? Was it convincing for his friends? I don't know. Let's find out next time. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the great questions and the great insights in the chat. Thank you for exercising your mind in such a cool way. And I hope to join you next time. Please, if you liked the video, like it and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.